Alrighty, so it is now 7:05 Mountain Time, and this platform committee meeting is called to order. Mr. Secretary, if you could please take attendance, and if you can, start with the people who will actually be voting first, but whatever's easiest on you.
Okay. I have just the primary, so you want me to call the alternates afterwards?
Yes, I'd like to have a record of everyone who is present for the minutes. I think it's important to acknowledge everybody, if at all possible.
Yeah. I just gotta switch screens for a moment. Okay.
And I'm sorry to spring that on you. You might not have known that that's my habit. If you haven't read L&C minutes, I do try to list everyone in the gallery and everything because I think they deserve credit for being involved party members.
Okay, just give me 1 second to get that second screen up.
No problem. Again, this meeting, it's going to be a little bit of a learning for all of us. And to just say on the recording now, which I said before this meeting, so that people who are following along would understand, most of our votes will be oral roll call votes. The ones that aren't, we will deal with either by raising hands on Zoom or doing voice votes. If someone would like to get my attention because they would like to speak, if they could please raise their hand on the participants window, and I will be noting you down in the order that you raise your hand, as well as I can humanly do, and those on the phone just politely interrupt that they'd like to be put into the queue.
Okay, it's gonna take me too long to get the alternates in ABC order, so I'll just call them as I have them on my list.
That's
here.
fine. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm ready to go. I hope I don't butcher anyone's name. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Matt Choco from Virginia.
Yeah, I'm here.
Present. Laura Epke.
I'm here.
Richard Fast.
Present.
Jim Fulner.
Present.
Helen Gilson.
Here.
Paul Grindle.
Here.
Duke Van Horn.
I'm here.
Thomas Knapp.
Here.
Kat Martin.
Here.
Josh McHose.
Here.
Randy McGlenn.
Present.
Al Meckley. Al Meckley from Pennsylvania. Bennett Morris. Bennett Morris from Illinois. Dale Perry.
I'm here.
I am here. Roger Roots. Roger Roots from Montana. Hearing nothing. Brian Slawinski. Brian Slawinski from Georgia. Aaron Starr.
I'm here.
Curry Taylor.
Present.
And Karen Ann Harless.
Present.
Okay, I am showing here. Give me 1 second here. All right, now you want alternates as well, right?
Correct, and there's no alternate present for any of those primaries that were absent, correct? Like another alternate for Pennsylvania. I don't see one, but I'm just making sure.
Yeah, the only alternates I had listed were from Michigan and Ohio, but I'm going to go through them anyway. All right, so state and L&T alternates. Richard Longstreth.
Yes, I'm here.
Jeff Wood.
Present.
Jim Cavoli.
Present.
Fred Cole from New York. Don't hear. Betty Rose Ryan. Tiffany Diaz Leon. John Watts. Spencer Diaz. That's New Hampshire. Alicia Matson.
Present.
Gus Tatalis. Jeffrey Adams. Okay, that was the list of state and LT alternates, and the second alternates are Lisa Gaiola,
Present.
John Faulkner, Matthew Maxneer, AJ Olding, Luke Enzor. Okay. Do you want a count of the primaries first, Madam Chair?
Yeah, just to say what our quorum is. I know we've met it, but just to get it on the record.
Yeah, 1. I have 16 present.
Okay, thank you. And I know as guests, we do have Mr. Richard Brown, and I note someone, first name of Paul. Paul, if you would like your full name on the record, if you could stick it in chat, otherwise it's fine. So that...
Are you referring to me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll put my full name in the chat.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
the alternates, do they fill in for their state or do they fill in for any of the primaries who are not present?
They fill in for the state. The only person who fills in for more than one person would be Mr. Longstreth if any of the LNC appointees were not present. But they are all present. Yes, you're welcome. All right, so that would conclude on the agenda the call to order and attendance. It took a bit more than 5, so I will allot more for that. We have an opportunity for public comment if Mr. Brown or, oh, that guest, that's Paul Grindle is here, Omar. That is not a guest. That's a committee member.
Oh.
So I will change that name. And Mr. Brown, you are our only guest so far. If you have anything you would like to comment, this is your opportunity.
This is Jeff Wood from Michigan. I don't see myself marked as present on the form.
Okay, Mr. Mercurio will take care of that. Thank you. And Paul Grindle is the primary for New York. If you would please just make sure you have that down.
Yeah, I did have him down.
Okay, thank you.
Who,
Paul Grindle, and then Jeff Wood, an alternate for Michigan. Wanted to make sure you had him noted.
oh, okay.
All right, so it doesn't appear that we have any public comment. So we are now going to go into discussion and debate as to whether or not we will have an in-person meeting, so that we could actually get a motion done on this. I'm going to introduce the motion on my own, that this committee will meet once in person, approximately midterm. In live meetings like this, motions do not require a second. So it's now open for debate. I am not going to speak for or against.
Point of information.
Yes, Mr. McGlenn?
This is Omar.
Oh, sorry.
So we don't require a second?
Not in committees. Committees do not require a second.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, this is Randy McGlenn with Washington State.
Yes?
I will open with an argument against, if that is in order.
It is in order.
Okay. I believe, and unfortunately I'm not able to experience the full experience of the Zoom meeting today. However, I do believe that with the technology that we have, and just for the travel cost for many of us, especially when we have to kind of save up to be able to attend national. I think that having an in-person meeting is just an encumbrance for many of us that is easily avoided with the tools that we have presently. I'm grateful for the fact that we have the ability to meet virtually, at least in the sense of this type of a forum, and I think it is sufficient for the purpose of achieving our goals in this committee, and that is my arguments against having an in-person meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I have Ms. Martin to speak next, and Mr. Starr and Mr. Choko on deck. Ms. Martin?
Okay, mine is also against, so I don't know if that is in order or not.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to do it.
Okay.
I do it in order of who gets their hand up.
Okay, I want to kind of tack on to what he said. Again, this day and age of technology is beautiful. We can meet virtually, and then also we can pose ourselves as the party that will make not only our own politics accessible to people who are of lower income, but show that we have a practical plan to make the government more accessible to the people.
All right, thank you. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, I'd like to move to postpone this item until the next electronic meeting. I think I'd like to see how we experience this meeting first, see how well it goes, and then at the next meeting we can make the decision as to whether it's wise or not to meet in person.
So, Mr. Starr, if I understand you correctly, you are moving to postpone definitely to our next scheduled meeting, an e-meeting?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
All right, so now we will be is that debatable? Let me look quickly. I believe it is. You probably know that quicker than I do. The postponed ones always get me.
Matt Chalco has a point of information, I guess.
Okay, Mr. Chalco?
Can you remind us of when the next scheduled e-meeting is?
I have not set it yet. I was setting it after this meeting tonight. It will be at least 10 days out.
Okay,
It'll probably be a little bit longer because I want to give time for people to put things on the agenda, and you have to have at least 10 days notice.
Sure. So roughly 2 weeks, then, is what we're looking at.
Madam Chair, I believe I have the answer to this question.
Yes, Mr. Fast?
So on the agenda, it says next meeting date, March 4th, 2020, 7 to 9 p.m.
Did I set it and not remember? Well, there you go. Thank you so much. The next meeting is March 4th. Thank you, Mr. Fast.
Point of information from Omar.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to point out that it's on the list. You have one post on the list, and you said an agenda is forthcoming, and that's all that's on the list.
Got it. Sometimes I can't keep track if I'm coming or going.
Well,
all right, thank you. So we are now on Mr. Starr's motion to postpone definitely to next meeting, and I believe that is debatable. So, Mr. Starr, would you like to speak further to it?
Just that, I mean, we're all talking about the theoretical world at this point. Personally, I find electronic meetings to be very cumbersome, and I find that in-person meetings are just simply more productive. There's a lot of well, there's a lot that goes on with in-person meetings where people are able to measure each other more easily. But so I just mostly want to wait till the next meeting. Let's see how we experience this. You know, get away from the theoretical world. Let's actually experience this. And at the next meeting, we can make this decision just as easily as we could this evening.
Mr. Choko, I had you next on deck, but that was for the main motion. Do you wish to speak on the postponement?
Yeah, I'll speak here as well. So I'm going to speak mildly against. I actually more or less agree with a lot of stuff that Mr. Starr just said, but my concern is time. You know, what are we, like less than 3 months away from convention, right? Or about 3 months away from convention. So we postpone this another 8-9 days, and then let me ask you this, Madam Chair. Have you done any legwork as to figuring out where a geographically and a facility specifically we might do this meeting?
No, I have not, because I found from last meeting the committee itself generally has some pretty strong ideas on that. So
yeah, so I mean, then that would just, I think, would make me that much more concerned about the time. You know, not that we can't pull it off. Of course we can pull it off. It's enough time to do it. But is it enough time to do it with affordable airfare and planning time for people that may need a day off work and that kind of stuff? So I will probably vote against.
And Mr. Knapp had posted a considerable argument in chat. Mr. Knapp, would you like to be recognized to speak against?
No, I will post by text as much as possible, but thank you.
The people on the phone then do not get the benefit, and they will be voting. I certainly cannot force you to speak, but I think it would be in your best interest.
Well, okay then. I will just recreate what I posted in text. I opposed postponing this decision. We've already debated this by email. Everyone is equipped to make a decision, and delaying the discussion just raises travel and lodging costs if we make the mistake of having an in-person meeting. And that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, and I just would like the secretary to note that we have another guest. Mr. Francis Wendt has joined the meeting. And I believe Mr. McHose had his hand up first. Mr. McMahose?
I unmute myself. I would just like to add on a motion to also oppose this, to oppose delaying the decision, and that it would be too much of a cumbersome cost for those of us thousands of miles away who are already saving up money to go to the national convention. So,
okay, sorry. Don't mean to cut you short. I thought you were finished.
Yes, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Martin?
I want to speak against delaying it because I need, I work hourly. If we meet somewhere that is outside the state of Colorado, I have to, take a couple of days off. I also need to be able to make financial plans, and it's really coming to the deadline. I'm going to be able to have the finances to do it in person.
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
Okay, if there is no one else who wishes to debate,
but no.
Mr. Meckley, if you could please mute. I believe we're hearing your background conversation. To answer a point of order of Mr. Choco, I do have you on deck for the main motion. All right, if there's no one else who wishes to speak on Mr. Starr's motion, we will proceed to a vote on that one, and it will be roll call. Mr. Secretary, never call upon me unless I could cause or break a tie.
Understood. Okay.
And again, don't stress. We're all new at this right now. I know what it's like on your end. I know it all too well.
Yeah, I screwed up here on the vote thing.
If you have to do it on a piece of scratch paper, because yeah, that's fine. Nobody's expecting perfection.
Yeah, that's one thing I messed up. All right, I'm ready.
Okay.
Matt Choco.
This is on the motion to postpone, just to clarify. Thank you.
I'm a nay.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fast.
No.
Jim Fulner.
No.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Paul Grindle.
No.
Duke Van Horn.
I vote yes.
That's an aye. Thomas Knapp.
No.
I heard a faint no.
That's correct. No.
Cat Martin,
No.
Josh McHose,
No.
Randy McGlenn,
I vote nay.
Al Meckley, he's still not present. Bennett Morris, still not present. Dale Perry,
I vote no.
Omar Curl votes aye. Roger Roots, Montana.
He will not be present tonight at all. He
Okay.
gave notice.
Okay. Mr. Sawinski, Georgia, still not here. Aaron Starr,
I vote yes.
Curry Taylor.
No.
Okay, 1 second.
Okay, that is very obviously did not pass, and since we only have 4 minutes left scheduled, unless someone moves to extend time, I'm going to recognize Mr. Cholko now on the main motion of the in-person meeting.
Okay, so I'll speak against having an in-person meeting, and I think if we look specifically back at the last term, you know, I didn't do the math on it, but we were massively more productive in terms of how many proposals came through email and e-meetings versus our in-person meeting. We did a lot of work. There was a lot of discussion and stuff that happened in our in-person meeting. But as I recall, we only got through a handful of proposals there, and that amount of time and cost is not even remotely close to worth it from that point of view. I think we could do so much more work in e-meetings for a lot less time and hassle. I personally like in-person meetings. I just can't make a reasonable argument in favor of one at this point, just considering how I've seen this committee work over a couple of terms now. I just don't see the benefit, a sufficient benefit to justify the cost in both money and time.
Okay, I see Mr. Starr, and I am adding myself on deck just to add something to Mr. Cholko's observations about last meeting, not really to argue for or against. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, I think that we really owe it to the National Convention as a whole to come up with the best proposals we can that are fully deliberated by the committee. And my experience has been that whatever we do by email is problematic because it doesn't really allow for amendments, normal amendment process. The caliber of conversations that take place in an electronic meeting are just nowhere near what they are during an in-person meeting, which provides opportunities for, you know, recess and lunch, and quite a bit of good discussion happens candidly at the bar. And, you know, good proposals come out that way. So just the quality of the proposals that we will ultimately adopt, I think, will be better. And I think we all kind of knew what we were signing up for when we joined. We knew there was the distinct possibility that we could have in-person meetings. And I don't want to short shift the entire convention because of our personal decision to, I get wanting to economize, but I think we knew this all going up front. So thank you.
All right, I'm going to speak briefly. I know that we have Gilson and Perry on deck. If we have time, we are running up against the limit. I don't think it's exactly fair to count the number of proposals as to how productive it was. We were able to pass some complex proposals that may not have never, that's weird, may never have passed by email. So yes, we did not pass many, but I also think people who maybe were a little bit at odds saw other people more as human beings at that meeting, and there's a value to that. We are, Ms. Gilson, you have 1 minute unless someone wishes to extend time.
Thank you. I just wanted to put my voice to opposition to an in-person meeting. I think that it's sinfully wasteful to spend $10,000 or $15,000 in travel for a meeting we can obviously do electronically. I mean, it may be a little facetious of me to say, but while cyber sex is not exactly the same as in-person sex, it will get the thing done. So I think that in light of the amount of time our platform is going to be given on the floor at convention, spending that much money to have in-person platform meetings is very foolish. And I think that the body would agree if they were able to vote on that with us.
Okay, I do have Mr. Perry on deck, but we are out of time. So without a motion to extend time, we are going
Madam Chair, motion to extend 5 minutes.
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Perry to extend time for 5 minutes. This will require a 2/3 vote. If I really don't want to do a roll call on this, so if those of you who are in the computer interface, please raise your hand if you're in favor of extending time. And then Mr. Ricciuro, if you could call for the vote of the people on the phone.
How do you raise your hand?
Oh, if you see your name on the participants list, hover over it, and you can raise your hand. Well, I'm just, Mr. Fast and Mr. Glenn, what are your opinions on this?
I vote no for extend. This is Nick Glenn.
Mr. Fast?
I abstain.
Okay, Mr. Omar, we need a 2/3, which it looks like it might be close, so that's why I'm waiting for your tally.
I'm in favor.
Yeah, I was just waiting for your tally to see if we had the 2/3.
Okay, who's on the phone?
Mr. Fast abstained and Mr. McGlenn voted no.
Okay, Mr. Fast abstains and Mr. McGlenn votes no. Okay. Abstain. Glenn votes nay.
Yeah, so if you just let me know how many yeses and how many nos, we can see if that's 2/3.
So are there any more opposition?
Well, if you see people who did not raise their hand, then they are in opposition. So it looks like Mr. Taylor is in opposition. Ms. Gilson. And Mr. Van Horn. So just scrolling down
Madam
here.
Chair, Ms. Gilson just posted in the chat that she did raise her hand.
Okay, so scratch Ms. Gilson from the nays. If I could ask everyone until the vote is called, the totals are given by the secretary, if you could keep your hands raised just to make things easier for Omar while he's getting used to the interface.
Madam Chair, while we have just a moment while he's working on that interface, this is Richard Longstreth. In these types of votes, should I be voting in case one of the primaries from the LNC steps away, or how would you prefer that I do this?
I will note if one of the LNC primaries steps away. So unless I alert you to that, please do not vote.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Starr? Or is that Mr. Fast?
Yeah, Richard Fast, requesting to be recognized.
Yes.
Okay, so for example, I was appointed by the LNC and I just abstained. Does that still count, or is that considered as me stepping away?
No, that count. E-meetings are different than emails. If you're here, you're here. Even if you refuse to vote, you're here.
Okay, thank you.
Point of information.
And Mr. Brown is correct on something. Yes, Ms. Martin?
So If he says that he abstains, that's an express abstention.
Yes.
And not a no vote, essentially.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Brown raised a valid point, is that those who didn't raise their hand might be abstaining. So thank you so much, because I am still getting used to this format as well. So we had all of the yeses raise their hands, and we noted on the phone who was a no. Would the express no's please raise their hand? I mean, it's looking to me like we have the 2/3. And we could have talked about this for 5 minutes just for future reference. It's usually not worth it if someone just wants 5 minutes.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
This is
Starr?
Aaron Starr. Can I suggest that everybody lower their hands first, and then you call for the no votes with people raising their hands?
Everyone's...
So we clear the board. So clear the board first,
yep.
And then ask for people to...
I did so. I cleared it. So will the no votes please raise their hand?
I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Well, Mr. McGlenn voted no, so those must have been we have the 2/3.
Yeah.
All right. So 5 minutes, Mr. Knapp. I mean Perry. Excuse me.
Yeah. So again, as Mr. Knapp pointed out, there's already been lengthy discussion via email on this. Also, Mr. Starr mentioned that we shouldn't shortchange the delegates at the National Convention. I completely agree, but they're already being shortchanged due to the proposed agenda only giving us 2 hours for platform discussion. And there are probably other people on this committee like myself who are running for office and currently scheduling campaign events over the next couple of months. So any sort of vote that we have on having an in-person meeting might conflict with events that people already have going on. And as has already been mentioned in email, the only weekend between now and May 1st where there are no state conventions, where we know that there's not going to be a conflict, is Easter weekend, where some people have family obligations. So I will be voting no on an in-person meeting prior to Austin.
Mr. Knapp, you said your hand was raised, and Mr. Longstreth, is this?
I have just a point of information.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, just to clarify, is Oregon's convention not Easter weekend?
There's no conventions Easter weekend as far as I'm aware.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and fill in the group. Oregon is having a convention Easter weekend.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Knapp. Oh, your hand was raised. Never mind. I got you. All right. Is there anyone else?
Chair, this is Madam
Okay,
Chair
Mr.
Randy
McGlenn.
McGlenn. I called the question.
Okay, just for points of information, questions cannot be called in committees. A lot of people don't know that.
Apologies.
Oh, no, that's okay. Most people do not know that. You just let time. That's why we put time limits. So unless anyone else wishes to speak, and I don't see anyone, we will be proceeding to a vote on this motion. All right, I do not see anyone. Mr. Mercurio, if you could proceed to roll call vote, and I want to make one note. Ms. Gilio had said because of the confusing nature between phone and no up or down signals on Zoom, that it's probably faster just to do roll call votes on everything, and I am tending to agree with her. All right,
argument for me.
Mr. Secretary. The motion, Mr. Knapp, is this committee will meet once in person approximately mid-term. That is the motion on the floor.
Matt Choco?
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Secretary, I'm sorry.
Okay. Matt Choco?
Yeah, it's a no from me.
Point of information, Madam Chair. I know we're voting. Can you explain what a nay and an aye vote means?
An aye is yes, a nay is no, and either yes or no is acceptable. There's no magic words.
Okay. So
I
a nay
think he was.
means we will not meet in midterm.
He votes no against the motion.
No, but what I mean is that this motion means that we'll only meet at the convention.
Yeah, well, unless there's other motions in the future. All I can tell you what this would mean is that my motion fails. I don't know what any future motions may come up.
Yeah.
But my motion that we will meet approximately midterm would fail if there's more no's.
Yeah, that's what I wanted everyone to understand what they were voting on. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Matt Choco was a nay. Laura Epke.
Nay.
Richard Fast.
No.
Jim Foner.
No.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Paul Grindle.
No.
Duke Van Horn. Mr. Van Horn. Tom Snap.
No.
Cat Martin.
Nay.
Josh McHose.
Nay.
Randy McGlenn.
Nay.
Al Meckley. Ms. Morris not here. Darryl Perry.
I am here.
Oh, Bennett Morris is
Sorry.
here.
I joined late. I vote no.
Give me 1 second. I need to note that. 941. Mr. Perry.
Darryl Perry votes no. And Omar, look at the chat. Duke Van Horn said that he did say yes, although I did not hear him, and I'm assuming you did not either.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I will vote aye. Roger Roots, not here. Mr. Slawinski, I don't see him.
I'm here.
Brian Slawinski from Georgia?
Yes, I got on late too. I had kids I had to put to bed.
Okay. How do you vote?
I vote no.
Okay. Aaron Starr?
I vote yes.
And Curry Taylor?
No.
All right.
Then we have the two on the phone. Did you call them and I missed it?
I've got everybody except Al Meckley giving a vote.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think we need to wait right now for the totals that obviously failed. Mr. Mercuro will give us the totals when he has it. So the next item on the agenda was contingent upon this item passing, which it did not. So we are now on the next motion, and what we had so far was amend 2.13. Does everyone have the agenda in front of them, or do we need? There we go. Okay. So there were.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Fast.
I'm one person on the phone. I have the agenda in front of me, so you don't need to read it unless other people on the phone request it, but I have the agenda in front of me.
Well, I think I'm going to read it for just clarity of the record. It is to add the following to the very beginning of the healthcare plank, which is currently 2.13. We acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, as the right to bear arms does not dictate the government needs to purchase guns for all Americans. The individual right to health care does not necessitate the state provide health insurance for all. The rest of the plank remains untouched, but it does read, we favor a free market healthcare system. We recognize the freedom of individuals to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any, the level of health care they want, the care providers they want, the medicines and treatments they will use, and all other aspects of their medical care, including end-of-life decisions. People should be free to purchase health insurance across state lines. So that was sponsored by 4 persons. So I will consider this a live motion. I'll make it on behalf of those on behalf of those four, which was Gilson, Knapp, Martin, and Perry. And we have 30 minutes allotted for this, so that's until 8:15. And
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I would like to be added to the queue.
Okay. And
I will speak in opposition if that matters.
It does not. Okay, I'm going to ask here. I believe I have these in the right order. And is there any objection to alternate speaking in debate, or do I need to ask each time? Because I do have an alternate who wishes, and I would, if the committee's not going to object, you still reserve your right to do so later. I'm just going to assume no objection. If you object, when I call them, please let me know. So I have Mr. Cavoli, Mr. Cholko, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Starr, and Mr. Fast. Mr. Cavoli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. But yes, this does appear to even split Ohio a little bit of the Second Amendment in a plank related to healthcare to be needlessly incendiary in this point of platform. And it's not a parallel that helps drive our point home. As big of a fan as I am of both, I don't like the two put together in this setting.
Okay, Mr. Cholko?
So, I don't know whether I'm really speaking for or against. I have a little concern. You know, we start off talking about a right to obtain health care, and then later on in that same sentence, we talk about a right to health care without the word obtain. I'm not offering an amendment at this time, but I may in a minute here. I feel like that doesn't, I feel like that's saying two slightly different things, and I kind of want to know if how everybody else feels about that wording there.
All right. I have Mr. Taylor and then Mr. Starr, Mr. Fast, and Mr. Fulner on deck. Mr. Taylor?
Yes, I was going to say exactly the same thing as the previous speaker. I'm sorry, I don't know the person's name, but we start out saying to obtain in that first phrase, which I think makes this more attainable to libertarians. And then that second phrase, it says individual right to health care. I think we need that to obtain in that second phrase as well. And I'd like to move to amend that if possible.
Okay, so you are moving to amend to add the word obtain, where
to obtain health care in the second line, just like it is in the first sentence.
So the individual right to obtain health care does not necessitate, and so on.
Correct.
Okay. So now we are on the amendment. On the primary motion, I have Starr, Fast, and Fulner. I am assuming you want to remain in that order, and unless you want to speak on the amendment, let me know. Otherwise, now I'm going to be calling for people who wish to speak on the amendment. I will keep your order. Ms. Martin?
So I'm in favor of the amendment. Because I think that to obtain is important to drive our point home, that it's you are making a choice to get it, and it's not you have to get it or it's going to be provided to you.
Okay, Mr. McHose.
I would just like to add that we agree here in Alaska that no one should be forced to purchase a product. So,
okay,
should be in play. Be placed as well there.
I have Ms. Gilson, and then Mr. Grindle, Mr. Fulner, and Mr. Starr. Ms. Gilson.
I just wanted to offer that I would be willing to accept that as a friendly amendment to save time and voting if the other sponsors are willing to add the word obtain in the second location.
Just a point of parliamentary information. There really is no such thing as a friendly amendment. Once a motion is given to the body, it belongs to the body. And unless I can ask if there's any objections at this point, seems like everyone so far has been in favor I have got on deck Mr. Grindle, Mr. Fulner, Mr. Starr, and Mr. Perry on the amendment. If you could please lower your hands. If anyone objects to this amendment, can you please speak up?
I object to this amendment.
Okay, so we're going to continue on debate. Mr. Grindle.
I object to the amendment because I think that having a section of our healthcare plank talk about the 2A is unnecessary in general. So I would not support having a change at all.
Okay, Mr. Fulner.
Yeah, so I oppose the amendment because I agree that we should have the same phrase both before and end. I think the word obtain is unnecessary. The phrase is the right to health care, and us just adding wobbly goop libertarian words for no reason is stupid.
Okay, I have Mr. Starr.
Yeah, I candidly don't like the word obtain. I can understand, say, seek. I can understand pursue, but obtain makes it seem like it's something you have the right to grab from somebody else, as opposed to, you know, I mean, I don't have the right to obtain money or to obtain happiness. I have the right to seek happiness and pursue happiness. So I'm against the use of the word obtain, period.
Okay, I have Mr. Perry and then Ms. Martin on deck.
Sorry, I had lost my mute button there. So I object to the amendment to the motion of adding obtain in that second instance. And let me draw another parallel. If people don't want a parallel to the right to bear arms, what about the right to petition your government for a redress of grievance? Do I have a legal right to obtain paper? Yes. Is there any obligation that taxpayers provide me with paper and pencil with which to write my petition for redress? Absolutely not. So I do think that having the term the individual right to health care at least once in this plank does make sense. And as far as Mr. Fulner's objection of adding obtain in the first instance because it's libertarian gobbledygook for no reason, no. This is the libertarian platform. We should have libertarian wording in the libertarian platform.
Okay, I have Ms. Martin.
So, I believe it was Mr. Starr that was talking about the word obtain, and I understand where he's coming from, but this is really more of a question as to what would acquire be more fitting. What do you feel would be the best fitting word that would be synonymous with obtain? I don't know if that's like in order but I'm just wondering what he would propose as a substitute.
It's in order for you to ask him to consider to make an amendment to an amendment, but not to have some crosstalk.
Okay.
All right. I do not see any other hands raised for debate, which means we're going to go to vote on this amendment. A yes vote would insert the word obtain in that second instance, and a no vote would leave the main motion untouched and back up for debate. Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Yeah, give me a second. There we go. All righty. Ms. Choco.
Aye.
Ms. Epke.
Yes.
Richard Fast.
I vote no on the amendment.
Ms. Gilson. I'm sorry, Mr. Fulner.
I was going to say, I vote no on the amendment.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Gilson.
Yes on the amendment.
Mr. Grindle.
No.
Mr. Van Horn.
I abstain.
Put that in a different category. Mr. Knapp.
I abstain.
Miss Martin.
Aye.
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 Josh McColl's. Mr. McColl's.
Nay.
Nay or aye?
Nay.
Nay.
How did Mr. McCose vote?
I heard a nay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McGlenn?
Oh, no, that was Mr. McGlenn you heard. He voted no. I don't think we heard from Mr. McCose.
I'm going to...
Okay, he says nay. Okay,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
see it on the chat. I see it.
Thank you.
Mr. Meckley. Mr.
Present.
Bennett Morris.
No.
Mr. Perry.
I vote no.
I am going to abstain. Mr. Root's not here. Mrs. Slawinski.
No.
Mr. Starr.
California votes no.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I show 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor.
Point of order?
Okay, one moment. Who had the point of order?
This Curry Taylor. Looks like Laura Ebke's vote was a yes, not no.
Correct. I have 5 as voting yes, but in any event, this does fail. We can get the exact totals in the minutes. So we are moving now to the main motion, not amended. There was a point of information from Ms. Gilson asking if she expressly abstains, can Ohio's alternate vote on this ballot? No, this is treated the same as a in-person meeting. The only way the alternate can vote is if you're physically not here. If you left the meeting, then your alternate can vote. As long as you're here, you're here. It's different than email. All right, we are back to debate on the main motion, and I had Starr, Fast, and Fulner already on deck. So, Mr. Starr.
Point of information. Somewhere.
Yes.
So as, just so I'm on track here. So as it's on the screen, it hasn't been amended anyway. It's still 213
Correct.
is still the way.
Correct. It's non-amended. Mr. Starr?
Thank you.
Yeah, so candidly, I just don't see how this sentence even adds to the blank. The existing first sentence of a blank says, we favor a free market healthcare system. And the second sentence says, we recognize the freedom of individuals to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any, the level of healthcare they want, the care providers they want, the medicines and treatments they will use, and all other aspects of their medical care, including end-of-life decisions. I mean, built into this is the right to pursue healthcare. So I'm a big believer in saying in fewer words rather than saying in a greater number of words. Just adding words converts us into a long essay. And the more words we add that don't add real substance makes it less likely that people will read our platform. So I'm not in favor of increasing the number of words just for the sake of, at least in my opinion, repeating what we've already had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Fast, and I have Mr. Fulner and Ms. Epke on deck. Mr. Fast?
Okay, I speak in opposition not because I disagree with the idea in principle, but because I think the comparison and the wording of the proposal is a bit silly, particularly for those reading the platform for the first time. I would be interested in seeing an alternative proposal, but I will vote no on the language of this proposal. Thank you.
Okay, I have Mr. Fulner up next with Ms. Epke, Ms. Gilson, Mr. McCose, and Mr. Knapp on deck. Mr. Fulner?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that the biggest tool our platform is a tool of resources for our candidates. I have been tired of first-time candidates when asked by local media here in Michigan about the right to health care and responding with more or less, no, libtard, you don't have no right to that, go die. And it's a very hateful language that seems to come from the historical right wing of our party, not even our party as much as our country. And when you actually talk to folks and they say, well, what is a right? Do you have a right to guns? Every libertarian knows that. And then we say, well, what does that mean? It honestly makes sense, and it's a way for our candidates to explain our position in a way that is palatable to the public. And I think it is a very useful tool for us to include this in our platform.
Okay, I have Ms. Epke, then Ms. Gilson, Mr. McCose, Mr. Knapp, and Ms. Martin on deck. Ms. Epke?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have some concern about this amendment, not because I think I think the way we originally had it is fine, but I think that we're conflating different kinds of rights here. The question of whether or not you have the right to keep and bear arms is a negative right. The government cannot prevent you from doing that. Instead, what we're doing is we seem to be creating a positive right because the government doesn't prevent you from getting health care. It's the cost that keeps you from getting health care at this point. So we almost imply by creating this new positive right for health care that that people are supposed to, that the government is going to provide it. So I think that we get into a murky mess here by even adding to it.
Okay, I have Ms. Gilson, Mr. McCose, Mr. Knapp, Ms. Martin, Mr. Perry, and then I will ask if there's an objection to a member of the gallery speaking. Ms. Gilson.
Thank you, Ms. Harlow. I'm actually withdrawing my sponsorship of the ballot the way that it's worded and changing my vote to be in opposition of the wording and going with the simple, keep it simple, stupid kind of mentality. Let's stick with just what we have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCose?
Yes, I would like to express in favor of the amendment, being that it is very explicit in word choicing, that we add it, and it also differentiates us from the two major parties, being that one specifically says we will provide for you healthcare, whereas ours does not, and then the other says whatever else it says. But you can get my point.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Knapp?
Yes, I was one of the sponsors of this motion, but the more I look at the existing platform language versus the proposal, the more I like the existing platform language. And I also question, when we're passing proposals as a committee, we have to keep in mind how many proposals we're going to be able to offer to the delegates in the time we're allotted. I don't see this change as important, even if I kind of like it.
Okay, just so everyone knows where we are at, I have Ms. Martin and then potentially a gallery member, Mr. Perry and Mr. Grindle. Ms. Martin?
So I want to speak to the first part of the change. The saying that you have the right to obtain health care points directly to the UN's list of human rights. And that puts us in a position to say, hey, we're using the actual language of what your human right is, whereas our opposition is twisting those words to say that you should just be able to, get it. And then I would also like to make a proposal to amend to strike the second sentence involving the Second Amendment. Is that in order?
So you are, if I understand you, you want to put a period after have a right to obtain health care and strike all the rest of that language.
Correct, and keep the current existing language as
Correct.
is.
Okay, now we are on the amendment. So who I have on
Point
deck
of
for
information, sure.
Yes.
Would that
Yes.
be up to for all Americans in there, or was that to the very end of the sentence where she would like to strike it?
She wanted to strike it after we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, period. Strike the rest and keep the, obviously we're not touching the rest of the plank, that we're just dealing with the amendment language.
I just wanted to make sure she did not want to keep the individual right to health care does not necessitate the state to provide for insurance for all.
That is not the way I understood it. Ms. Martin, let me know if I'm incorrect.
So instead of a period there, healthcare for Americans, period, and then strike the rest.
I'm very unclear. So
Okay.
please state fully what your amendment is.
Okay. We acknowledge that individuals have that Americans have the right to obtain health care, period. Let's do it. I think that sounds better. That's my proposal to amend. We acknowledge that Americans have a right to obtain health care, period. Strike the rest.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
One moment. I understand your amendment, and if the committee will indulge me a little aside to Ms. Martin, I can tell you that putting the word Americans in there almost guarantees it to fail, in my opinion. I just want you to really think about that, just from my experience.
I will take your suggestion and leave it as individuals.
Okay, and so the first way I had stated your amendment is the way I got. Yeah, I'm not trying to pressure you either way. I'm just letting you know.
Right, I didn't think about that at all.
I knew once I said that you would see where you would pick up what I'm putting down. All right, so my statement of her amendment was correct. And let's recap where we are at. For the main motion, I have Mr. Perry, a gallery member, and Mr. Grindle on deck. Now we're on to only debating the amendment. Everyone, please lower your hands, and only people who would like to speak on the amendment, keep your hands raised.
Point of information.
Yes.
So we're on the main motion.
We're on the amendment.
So what is the amendment? Could you read that one more time, please?
Certainly will. This is what we're debating right now. Ms. Martin would like the amended language to read only. We acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, period, and then the rest of the platform as it currently stands. She is striking the whole bit about bearing arms and comparing it to health care.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have on deck Mr. Grindle, Mr. Starr, and Mr. Fulner.
So I'd like to speak in favor of this amendment to the motion. I think that the explanation of involving a right to bear arms looks very out of place and reads more like a textbook than a platform. And I'm not sure, I don't remember who it was, but I thank whoever submitted that amendment because I think that makes this much more solid. I would also like to ask a point of information.
Yes.
To be able to add the word "and" in between the first that blue sentence and then the "we favor a free market healthcare system," that would require its own separate amendment, correct?
It would, and we are only on the first level of amendment at this point because we voted down the other, so you can do a secondary amendment if it's germane to the amendment we're dealing with right now.
Okay. Would you say that's germane in your experience?
Well, what is your proposed amendment? I'll let you know.
It's literally just replacing the semicolon with the word "and."
I would think that is germane. It's not a semicolon at this time, it's a period, but what you're suggesting is it say, we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, comma, and we favor a free market healthcare system. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if the comma is needed there. I'll leave that up to the grammar nerds, but
It is, but okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the correction. But then, yes, that would be it.
Okay, so now we are on the secondary amendment. So I have still to talk if it passes. Let's right now, who would like to speak on the secondary amendment? Please raise your hand. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, I think we're going down a path that just makes us not flow at all. I mean, I thought it was difficult enough to have it read, we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, period. We favor a free market health care system, etc. I just think that doesn't flow at all. I think it flows even worse to say we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care and we favor a free market health care system. Once again, I just don't think any of this language really adds anything to what we already have. We favor a free market healthcare system. That's precisely why individuals have a right to pursue healthcare.
Okay, I have Mr. Perry, Ms. Giola, and Ms. Gilson. Mr. Perry?
So I like this amendment to the amendment, even though the wording on the screen in the live edit still has the extra word in there. I take issue with the suggestion that we need to make the platform flow better. I don't know if we should, get Vermin Supreme's time machine, go back to the 1700s and hire an 18th century poet to write the platform for us. But I think that this does make a much more coherent thought, and we will also need to make the second we favor a free market healthcare system into a lowercase w. And I would note that we have 3 minutes left, and I would object to extending time.
Okay, before we vote, I'll make sure the language is correct on the screen. Ms. Giola?
If you're taking out Fulner's point of the Second Amendment, okay, let's take it out, and it seems like everyone wants to go that way, but then why add in the whole thing of the right, because that seems to take it into that murky territory of whether the government pays for it or not. In the chat, I put a way of combining that if you're going to keep in that right to obtain or right to seek or right to pursue, combining that with that third sentence, we acknowledge that individuals have a right to seek health care through a free market system, through a free healthcare market system. That way it shows that, yeah, it's up to you to get it, but ain't no one paying for it, baby.
Or iambic pentameter, I saw. All right, Mr. Cavoli.
I would just briefly like to point out to the body that, I mean, rather than crawling down the whole of amendments and amendments to amendments and so on, the most expedient thing might be to just move to some votes on this. And frankly, if there's still a lot of contention, let this be voted down. We can bring this item back after it's been refined further through email process or other further deliberation, especially given the fact that 2 sponsors have pulled back from their enthusiastic endorsement of this change.
Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the secondary amendment? Okay, we will go to a vote on the secondary amendment, and I could just see time will run out during the middle of the vote. So if anyone wishes to make any kind of motions to extend time to debate on the secondary, the first, or the main, now's the time to do it. Ms. Martin?
I would like to move to extend 2 minutes on the main motion.
Okay, we're not there yet.
Not there yet.
Okay, but I got it. I'll make that for you when we get to that point. All right. Voting on, is there any there is objection, never mind. A roll call vote on the secondary amendment, which is to change the period to a comma, add the word and then lowercase we in the first sentence so that it would say, we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care and we favor a free market health care system. Are we clear on what we're voting on? Okay, I don't see any questions. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
See, I didn't see that, and that's what I'm trying to get
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to make sure it was correct on the screen.
Okay, I hope that looks good.
Take it, the period at the end of healthcare there, make that a comma, please, and then you will have it correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll leave it up there for just a moment and begin to vote. Matt Choco.
Aye.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fast.
No.
Tim Fulner.
Pass.
He said to pass.
Oh, abstain or no vote?
No, that you go back to him when you're done with everybody.
Okay. Helen Gilson.
No.
Paul Grindle.
Aye.
Duke Van Horn.
I abstain.
Thomas Knapp.
Abstain.
Kat Martin.
Yes.
Joshua McHose.
Aye.
Randy McGlenn.
No. No.
Al Meckley.
He's not here.
Right. Bennett Morris.
No.
Daryl Perry.
Daryl Perry from New Hampshire doth vote in favor of the motion.
I vote nay. Roger Roots. Not
He
here.
will not be here.
Yeah. Brian Sawinski.
No.
Aaron Starr.
Aaron Starr votes no.
Curry Taylor.
Aye.
And now back to Mr. Fulner.
I vote no.
Okay, I can see just from my informal reckoning that that fails. So we are now back to the primary amendment, which was just to have it be, we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, period, leaving the rest of the original plank untouched. So we will proceed to voting on that amendment whenever Mr. Secretary is ready.
Matt Choco.
I'm gonna abstain.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fast.
Yes.
Jim Fulner.
Pass.
Helen Gilson.
Yes.
Paul Grindle.
Sorry. Can you go back? Can you go back and change that to no?
Excuse me?
She changed her vote to no.
Sorry. Can you?
Understood. Understood. Thank you. Paul Grindle.
Aye.
Duke Van Horn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
Abstain.
Kat Martin.
No.
Josh McHose.
Aye.
Randy McGlenn.
Mr. McGlenn?
No.
Al Meckley, not here. Bennett Morris.
No.
Daryl Perry.
Daryl votes in favor.
Omar Crow votes nay. Roger Roots. Not here, right? Brian Sawinski.
No.
Aaron Starr,
No.
Curry Taylor,
No.
and we are, Madam Chair, you will be not voting, correct?
Right, because if it clearly fails, we are now back to the original.
Point of information.
Yes.
Jim votes
Mr. Fulner passed.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yes, Jim votes yes. I know.
And he voted yes. Thank you, Mr. Fulner. It still would fail. All right, we are back to the original proposal, which was in blue in the agenda. Ms. Martin asked to extend for 2 minutes for debate on this. Is there any objection to an extension for 2 minutes, with me reminding the body that it will take more than 2 minutes to do a vote on her extension for 2 minutes? So please let me know if there is any objection.
Point of information.
Yes, Mr. Fast.
Okay, so I thought that what we just voted on, which was we acknowledge that individuals have a right to obtain health care, period, was became the main motion. So are we now ignoring all of the proposed amendments and going back to the original text, which I thought we had already addressed this?
We had never voted on the original text. That first thing that you thought was the main motion was the First Amendment. And then we had a secondary amendment. So secondary amendment voted down, First Amendment voted down. Now we're back to the original language, unamended.
All right.
Okay. Seeing no objection to 2 minutes.
I object to extending time for such small amounts of time. Either do it for 10 minutes or don't do it at all. No, I'll vote against any extension at this point as well.
It's going to take more than 2 minutes for us to take a vote on extending for 2 minutes. Revoke your objection.
Ms. Martin,
yes.
I think some time was wasted in our not knowing what we were doing. What was it that you wanted 2 minutes for?
The main motion.
I mean, what was it that you wanted to say? I'm giving you a chance to say it in less than 2 minutes, and people can yell at me.
You had other people that were lined up to
Okay.
discuss, and I wanted to give them time.
Okay, I gotcha. Mr. Perry, do you wish to speak for 2 minutes?
No,
All right.
I want to just go ahead and vote and get this damn thing over with.
Okay, no reason for tempers to get flared. We are on now the main motion. We will be voting. We are out of time. Whenever Mr. Secretary is ready, to be clear, what we are voting on is the addition of all of that blue language as it was originally typed in your agenda. Whenever Mr. Secretary is ready.
Okay. Matt Choco?
Pass.
Laura Epke?
No.
Richard Fast?
No.
Jim Fulner?
Yes.
Helen Gilson?
No.
Paul Grindle?
Abstain.
Duke Van Horn?
No.
Thomas Knapp?
No.
Cat Martin?
Abstain.
Josh McHose?
Hey.
Madam Chair, did you hear that?
Nay.
Thank you. Al Meckley?
He's not here.
Oh, I skipped Mr. McGlynn. Sorry, Randy McGlynn.
No.
Bennett Morris.
No.
Darryl Perry.
I vote in favor.
Miss Omar Crow votes nay. Brian Swinsky.
No.
Aaron Starr.
No.
Curry Taylor.
No.
Okay, somebody had skipped. I think it was Mr. Choco.
Matt Choco, and I'll just abstain.
Okay.
So that fails, and we are out of time. So we are now moving to the next proposal that we had on the agenda. I had this also for 30 minutes, which is pretty much going to take us to the end of our schedule. We had two motions that each had 4 sponsors. The first one to get 4 sponsors I am considering as the primary proposal, and the other one that got it second as a substitute proposal. Now let me explain on how we can handle that. Is each of these can be perfected separately. So you can perfect the primary, you can perfect the substitute, they get done simultaneously. When we think we are done perfecting, then we vote on whether or not the substitute motion becomes the main motion. If not, we go back to the primary proposal. This can be a little bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it actually is quite helpful. So we are going to proceed to debate. You can debate or amend either of them at this point. I have Mr. Perry, Mr. Starr. Mr. Perry?
Yes, sorry, it took me 2 seconds to hit unmute. I would make a motion to actually delete the plank. I don't like either of these proposals, and I think if we're to do anything with this plank, it should just be deleted. I certainly don't applaud people who sacrifice blah da 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 da
Mr.
going
Perry,
over into the. I'm speaking to the proposal.
Yeah, but it's out of order, so that's why I'm interrupting you. It's not. You can't just vote it down and then move a separate motion to delete. It's not germane to either of these. It's not an amendment that's germane to either of these. You're free to make it later, but it's not in order now. So I have Mr. Starr.
Can I make a motion to strike everything except for the word "we"?
No, I believe that's dilatory. Mr. Starr?
I'd like to amend the primary proposal to retain the strikeout language. So that way, your only amendment to this would be the addition of the second, what would now be the second sentence.
Okay.
So then what it would read is all the language would then be included. So it would then say, we support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. We support the right to self-defense and applaud those who sacrifice their time, money, armaments, and lives to defend the Americans' freedoms from attack. The United States should both avoid entangling alliances and abandon its attempts to act as policemen for the world. We oppose any form of compulsory national service.
Okay. So now, to let everyone know where we're at, if you are wishing to speak on the primary proposal, it's now only up to debate on the amendment of Mr. Starr. The other one you can talk about to your heart's content. It's very difficult to keep track of who is in line for what, so just get in line if there's something that you can speak to that you want to. So Mr. Cavoli.
So actually, I still would like to speak to
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Starr. I jumped the gun.
That's okay. So I don't know what the objection is to the language the first sentence. I think it's necessary that we have a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. It doesn't mean that it has to be necessarily a government-run military. I don't know how you would do that, but you know, I guess in some circles they believe it's possible. I'm not so sure. But I do think that we need to take steps to defend ourselves as a country, just like we should take steps to defend ourselves as a household or as an individual. So I think maintaining, sufficient ability to defend the United States against aggression is necessary. So I'd like to keep that language. I don't have really big objections to the new language that we want to add, though I'm kind of weird about the armaments language. But other than that, I can live with this. Preferably, I'd like to have the existing language as things stand and not make any change at all. But if I'm going to make an amendment to make this a little bit better, I think that retaining the first sentence would make the proposal stronger and more likely to pass at a convention. Because candidly, I don't think you have 2/3 of the delegates who would vote to say we shouldn't have a military anymore.
Madam Chair, I'd like to be added to the queue.
Okay, thank you. So who I have on deck is Mr. Cavoli, Mr. Perry, Ms. Martin, Mr. McHose, and Mr. Fast. Mr. Cavoli.
Yeah, I would reinforce the point Mr. Starr sort of closed with there, that I would be most happy perhaps if we left this alone presently, bearing in mind our remit to the delegates at the convention and import. Furthermore, any of our continuing use of language regarding maintenance of a military, I do find somewhat problematic. So in particular on the final proposed change, you know, unless we're going to clarify that peacetime active duty really isn't a thing in a strict constitutional reading, which gets very complex and I think beyond our capability to hash out in this meeting, I would favor either dropping back to one of these original proposals, not going with the hybridized version here, or just voting down all this and again leaving it alone for a minute.
Okay, Mr. Perry, and I am adding myself to the queue after Mr. Fast. Mr. Perry?
I would like to make a motion to amend the amendment to strike both the current first sentence plus any text in blue so that it would only read, the United States should both avoid entangling alliances and abandon its attempts to act as policemen of the world. We oppose any form of compulsory national service. That is germane, that is in order.
No, that is, Mr. Starr, I believe well, state your point of order, but I think I was already going to do it.
We already have an amendment, the amendment which is the substitute, and then we have my amendment. I don't think you can go more than, I don't think you can go any deeper than this.
No, well, no, actually, that wasn't going to be mine, because you can go too deep on each of them.
Oh, that's right, because of the substitute.
Yes,
You're right.
But I do still think that is out of order, because first you're going beyond his original motion, but basically what you're doing is saying the same thing as voting it down. So just vote it down. I don't think that's a proper amendment, Mr. Perry. So I'm ruling that out of order.
I would like to challenge the ruling of the chair.
Okay.
Seconded.
1 second, I need a fresh piece of paper.
So this is a debatable motion.
It is. Will everyone please lower their hands for right now until I explain what we're doing. And then I will let you know when to get in queue, because I get to speak first on appeal of my ruling. What Mr. Starr did was simply add back in the original language of the red language. Mr. Perry was suggesting going back to deleting it, which voting no on Mr. Starr's amendment would accomplish, and also deleting the additional language. To me, that goes beyond the scope of the amendment. Mr. Perry would be able to do that after Mr. Starr's amendment was defeated. It's not that I don't think he can do it, he just can't do it right now. And I'm not going to bother to speak last. Okay, I have Mr. Starr.
Okay, I guess I would say that even after we dispense with it, it wouldn't be a proper motion. Here's why. Basically, the language that I am amending here is simply we support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. If Mr. Perry wants to later on make an amendment to those specific words, he certainly can do so and propose that. But that would be beyond, if he goes...
Well, Mr. Starr, you're arguing against a ruling I haven't made yet, so this is just on the ruling I have made?
I'm saying that the chair is proper with the instant issue, and I will end up objecting to her later on if she chooses to go down the road where I think she's going. But I would vote to uphold the ruling of the chair for this small piece of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have anyone else wish to speak on the appeal of the ruling of the chair? Mr. Knapp?
If I'm not mistaken, the effect of Mr. Perry's motion is to amend the main motion. Therefore, it's in order.
We're not on the main motion. We're on an amendment to the main motion, just as a point of information. Okay, I have, that was Mr. Perry. Wait, who did you speak? Mr. Knapp. So now Mr. Perry.
So I want to speak on why I believe this is germane. On the last thing that we did about healthcare, we had an amendment that added some words, and then we had an amendment to the amendment to strike some of the words that were added. So I think that striking all of the words that are added, plus the words that are being added to what is added, is definitely germane. And I would encourage everyone to vote to overturn the ruling of the chair.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak on this? I'm waiving my right to speak last. All right, so we're going to—
Madam Chair?
Who, Mr. Fast?
Yes, I would just like to echo what Mr. Perry said. I agree with appealing the ruling of the chair. I do think that that is in order, and I would like the body to pursue that.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, we will proceed to a vote. Now, this can be confusing, so let me explain. A yes vote upholds the ruling of the chair, and a no vote opposes the ruling of the chair. It's a little bit opposite of what you would expect. And a tie would uphold the ruling, because then the appeal would fail. Is anyone unclear on that?
Can you just state that one more time, please?
A yes vote upholds the ruling of the chair. A no vote disagrees, would strike down the ruling of the chair.
So, Miss Chair.
Mr. Choco?
This is Mr. Fulner.
Oh, sorry.
I believe you're all right, except I was under the understanding that in the case of a tie, the chair ruling is not upheld, as the default would be to be against the motion, correct?
This is one of those strange exceptions, but let me put it to you this way. If we get a tie, I will get you the Roberts citation.
Oh, great.
All right, so we are proceeding to vote. Yes would, again, uphold my ruling. A no would disagree with my ruling and, strike it. So, Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Matt Choco?
I guess I'm going to abstain.
Laura Efke?
Aye.
Richard Fast?
No.
Jim Fulner?
I vote yes to uphold.
Helen Gilson?
No.
That was a pass?
She said no.
Oh. Paul Grindle?
What page?
258.
Sorry about that. Abstain.
Abstain? Wait. Duke Van Horn?
Yes.
Thomas Knapp?
No.
Cat Martin?
No.
Josh McColes?
No.
Randy McGlenn? Did we lose Mr. McGlenn?
Go back to him.
Yeah. Bennett Morris?
Aye.
Darrell Perry?
No.
Omar Crow votes aye to sustain the ruling of the chair. Okay. Root's not here. Brian Sawinski?
Mr.
No.
Grindle, okay, Mr. Zolinsky voted no. Mr. Grindle noted in chat he'd like to change to aye. Mr. Grindle, were you a no or an abstention?
I was an abstention.
Thank you.
One moment. Okay. I was at Slawinski. Mr. Starr?
I vote to uphold the ruling of the chair. I vote aye.
Curry Taylor?
Aye.
Okay, we missed
Mr.
Randy
McGlynn.
McGlynn. I'm not seeing anything in chat.
Mr. McGlynn? He probably is occupied with that meeting he had mentioned, so he's choosing not to vote. From my informal tally, the ruling of the chair is upheld. So we are back to debate. And who I had on deck for debate was Ms. Martin, Mr. McHose, Ms. Fast, and myself. Feel free to...
Madam Chair,
Yes?
I would like to be added to the queue.
I believe I said Mr. Fast right
Oh,
before my...
sorry.
Okay.
Did I miss her?
No problem. Mrs. Martin.
Okay, I would like to propose an amendment to the amendment.
Okay, so you're proposing an amendment to Mr. Starr's amendment on the primary motion.
Correct.
Okay, please state it.
So I would like to change the word maintenance to regulation and the word sacrifice to volunteer. So my amendment would read, we support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. We support the right to self-defense and applaud those who volunteer their time, money, armaments, and lives to defend the Americans' freedoms from attack.
I believe that goes beyond Mr. Starr's amendment. Again, you may disagree, but Mr. Starr's amendment added back in a sentence. It didn't touch that language you are looking to change. You can change that red language because that's what he added back in, but not beyond that. It would not be germane to the amendment.
Okay, then just change maintenance to regulation and leave the rest if that is not germane.
Okay, that would be in order. All right, I have up Mr. McHose, then Mr. Fast, and then myself.
I would like to point out that this amendment and this whole kind of plank kind of goes against the Second Amendment and the point of standing armies, that we should not have them. And the whole, that's kind of my point, is that we should strike out pretty much all of the first language up to just United States should both avoid entangling alliances, abandon its attempts to act as the policeman for the world, and we oppose any compulsory national service. Because, like, the military as it stands today is strictly unconstitutional, as it's supposed to disband after 2 years after any act of wartime. And
Okay, Mr. Fast, then I have myself, Mr. Starr, and Mr. Wendt with, if there is no objection to him. Mr. Fast?
Okay, I urge this body to vote no on the proposal and Mr. Starr's amendment. We are the party of principle and the party that proudly proclaims that taxation is theft. I'm not saying that there should be no defense, but rather that this proposal and amendment implies the use of theft to provide that defense, which goes against the non-aggression principle. So please vote no on the amendment and the main proposal.
Okay, I had myself up next. I'd just like to speak briefly that I do believe that that red language on either of them needs to be stricken, because I do believe it goes against the Dallas Accord. I think you really need to go through mental gymnastics to say, oh, well, it could be voluntary. When you say you support the maintenance, that means the compulsory maintenance. And what this does is add in a positive right to our platform. And generally, libertarians do not believe in unassumed positive rights. And I can tell you, I am one person who does not agree to the assumption of that right. And all it takes is one to disagree, and therefore you no longer have consent. That's all I'll say on that matter. Mr. Starr, and then Mr. Wendt, without objection.
So we have a plank that's called national defense. It's kind of meaningless to say national defense if you don't have a military. The argument before that somehow the Constitution prohibits a military after 2 years is actually not the case. What we have in the Constitution and what we had in the Founding Fathers' arguments was that they certainly had no problem with funding the Navy on an ongoing basis. But what they did do was they said that they didn't want to fund a standing army for longer than, they didn't want to authorize Congress to fund an army for longer, a standing army for longer than 2 years at a time. So, in other words, they could still renew it at the end of 2 years and continue to do that. But we're not, the Constitution doesn't prohibit a military. As far as the word regulation, I just don't see how regulation is a better word than maintenance. It seems like you need to maintain the ability to defend yourself, not regulate it. I mean, we're not asking the government to regulate this. Somehow we're asking them to maintain something that's sufficient to defend. And from my standpoint, let's just work on getting the military down to one that's just sufficient to maintain what we have today, or what the government today, their country today, rather. When we get to that nirvana place, then let's proceed to have the arguments about whether we want a military or not at all. But right now, I don't know. I think that I don't see the delegates adopting any proposal that eliminates the military. I just don't see it happening. I get that this committee might be a little more strongly composed towards that. I don't think the delegates are. So I'm against the word regulation. I'd like to keep the language of the first sentence. Thank you.
If there is no objection, Mr. Wendt.
I would object only because if other folks on the committee want to speak, they should be able to speak. We are supposed to end at 12 minutes from now.
I have no one else on deck other than Mr. Wendt. Is there still an objection?
I have wanted to speak on this for some time, Ms. Harlow.
Okay, well then Mr. Fulner, and what I'll do is if there's time, Mr. Wendt, and there's no one else, I will ask again if the committee will indulge. Mr. Fulner.
So I would like to make a motion to table this until a future meeting when Mr. Roots can attend.
So,
because Mr. Roots was the original author of the proposal. Mr. Roots had many emails to the list about this, and I feel it would be disingenuous for us to go forward without his particular input.
I do not believe it is in order to move to suspend, to postpone until someone is here. I do believe it's in order to move to postpone until the next meeting.
Then I will make my motion as that for the reason which I stated.
And I would just note that Montana chose not to name an alternate, and that is their prerogative. So we have a motion to postpone things as they are right now. So your primaries got a first and second amendment. There's no amendments on the substitute until our next meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Fulner?
That is correct, Mrs. Harlow.
All righty.
I object to postponement.
Okay, Mr. Starr.
I'm still saying I object to postponing. I'd like to resolve these as best we can. And
I
hopefully
believe
come to a
motion to postpone is debatable, so I was allowing you to.
I just don't think we should be delaying things just because somebody decides they don't want to attend a meeting. We have a quorum. So because we have a quorum, I just don't see the committee saying that because somebody else isn't here, that we should postpone. And we have other people who haven't shown up, like Mr. Meckley. So I don't want to postpone just because someone decides not to show up.
Mr. Knapp.
Otherwise we'd never meet.
Thank you. Mr. Knapp?
I favor postponing, both because I would like to hear Mr. Roots's input on his intentions with this motion, and because I think between the regular motion and the substitute, we actually have an opportunity to perfect this thing in email before the next meeting. So I support postponement.
Madam Chair, I'd like to be added to the queue.
Was that Mr. Mercurio?
No, Richard Fast.
Okay. And I also would like to be added to the queue.
Madam Chair, I had my hand up.
Yeah, I know, I've got you.
Okay.
Mr. Mercurio, then, and my screen's doing a weird thing. Everyone alert if I've missed somebody. I have Mr. Mercurio, Mr. Fast, and then myself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had kind of a point of information or a question, I guess, if you could answer it. If this is tabled until the next meeting, it can be worked on in email? Or is it just frozen as it is right now?
It's frozen as it is now till the next meeting.
Thank you. It speaks to what I want to do as terms of voting. Thank you.
Mr. Fast.
Yes, I support postponing until the next meeting because I would like to hear the original author's intent and feedback and reason for submitting this. I think that would be very helpful input as far as information that we need. Also, I think that having that extra time to go through both these proposals would give us an opportunity to really consider what we are discussing right now. I think it would be premature to vote on either or both these proposals at this point in time. I think that considering it at the next meeting would be more appropriate.
Okay, and I hate to do this to you guys, but I have a motion to amend the motion to postpone. The amendment would be to postpone it as it was originally on the agenda and to resolve those two amendments first. So let's vote on the first and second amendments.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Starr?
If you postpone it, what will happen is it will come back at the next meeting in its current state with all the open questions currently unresolved. So we'll just be right where we're at now.
Right, that's why I was amending the motion to postpone to exclude the two pending amendments.
You can't do that. I'm sorry. I'll look it up if you want. But.
Okay. Mr. Brown said I believe I can, but Mr. Brown says no. So I will withdraw my motion.
You can postpone the current motion, but you can't postpone.
They can bring back.
Yeah.
Mr. Knapp? Did you just forget to? Okay. And we are running up on out of time. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this motion to postpone?
Madam Chair, this is Randy with...
Okay, Mr. McGlenn, then Mr. Perry.
Madam Chair, I was just simply pointing out that I apologize for my previous absence. I'm back on the call.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perry? Mr. Perry? Going once?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I hit unmute. Would it be in order to resolve the pending questions, and then whatever becomes the main motion and the substitute motion are then the items that get tabled?
That is what I had tried to do. The only way to do that is to vote down the motion to postpone. Vote on those, not necessarily down, resolve them, and then bring back a motion to postpone. That's the only way that can be done. Okay, would anyone else like to speak? Okay, absent an extension of time, we are now going to proceed to a vote on the motion to postpone until the next meeting. If it passes, the whole thing as it stands now is postponed to the next meeting. If it doesn't pass, absent an extension of time, we will be proceeding to resolve all the pending questions, though a different motion to postpone can along that line somewhere be introduced. So we are on the motion to postpone this whole item until next meeting. Mr. Starr, you had a question?
Yeah, point of information. I assume that if the postponing does get adopted, the amount of time left on this item is what will be brought to the next meeting. So if there's 3 minutes left, that's what we will have, unless there's a motion to extend at that time.
That is an interesting question.
It's not just a question, it's actually how it works.
I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think when it's a new agenda item, it gets assigned a new time limit.
The reason why is because all meetings of a committee are considered a single session. So it's just a continuation of the meeting, of this session, the next meeting. It's just a different setting.
I'm going to disagree there, Mr. Starr, but we're not even to where that's germane at this point. So we're voting on the motion to postpone. Whenever Mr. Secretary is ready.
Okay. Matt Choco.
Just to be clear, a no vote would not postpone right now, right?
Right, and it would cause all the other prior questions to be immediately pending.
Okay, so I'll vote no.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fass.
I vote yes to table.
Jim Fulner.
Oh, yes.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Paul Grindle.
No.
Duke Van Horn.
I vote no.
Kat Martin.
No.
I skipped Thomas Knapp, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Josh McHose.
No.
Randy McGlenn.
I vote no.
Bennett Morris.
No.
Darryl Perry.
No.
Omar Okoro votes no. Brian Slawinski.
No.
Aaron Starr.
No.
Curry Taylor.
Aye.
Only 3 in favor, Madam Chair.
I counted
counted
4,
four.
but that's, you know, we can resolve that, but it still fails. So now we are voting on Ms. Martin's amendment to the primary proposal, which was to change the word maintenance to regulation, and absent a motion to extend, we're proceeding to a vote on that. Mr. Secretary.
Okay, can you state that again?
Okay. The primary proposal is all we're looking at this moment. Mr. Starr added back in his first amendment, we support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. Ms. Martin moved to strike maintenance and change it to regulation.
Yes, as I have it on the screen.
Okay, whenever you're ready for the vote.
And we're voting on that particular item now.
We're voting on that amendment. A yes vote would change the word maintenance to regulation. A no vote would put us back to Mr. Starr's primary amendment of adding that sentence back in.
Okay, I'm ready. Matt Choco.
Abstain.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fass.
No.
Jim Fulner.
Yes.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Paul Grindle.
No.
Duke Van Horn.
I vote no.
Thomas Knapp.
No.
Cat Martin,
Yes.
Josh McColl's,
No.
Randy McGlenn,
No.
Oh no, Bennett Morse,
No.
Dale Perry,
Pass.
Omar Crow will vote no. Brian Swinsky,
No.
Aaron Starr,
No.
Curry Taylor.
No.
Madam Chair, I showed 2 as aye. Is it in order to vote motion to extend time right now?
I will vote aye. I passed. I'm voting in
aye.
favor.
But it does fail, and yes, it is in order to do, well, no, I'm going to say, well, yeah, I guess, all right, this is difficult. We had a time certain ending, and I don't think you can extend that. And I'm going to say it's, oh, Lord have mercy. I'm going to say no, it's not in order, but a motion to postpone is back in order. All right, so we are now
Madam Chair, don't we still need to vote on the
oh yeah, that's
unamended motion?
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. We are now on Mr. Starr's amendment of adding back in the red language to the primary proposal.
Which was the word maintenance, correct?
No, it was that whole sentence. It was originally struck, we support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. Mr. Starr's amendment was to add that back in and also retain the blue language, but that was already part of the primary.
Yeah, we're just taking out the word regulation.
Just Madam Chair, point of information.
Yes.
My point of information is, to be clear, we are now voting on only adding back in the red language, we support the maintenance of a sufficient military to defend the United States against aggression. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Whenever Mr. Secretary is ready.
Yes. Matt Sokol.
No.
Laura Epke.
Yes.
Richard Fast.
No.
Jim Fulner.
No.
Helen Gilson.
Yes.
Paul Grindle.
Yes.
Duke Van Horn.
I
just
or I passed. Sorry.
I believe Paul Grindle voted yes.
I did.
Or no. Sorry. Again, I vote yes.
That was Duke Van Horn, right?
Okay.
Okay, and then Ms. Gilson, were you changing your vote?
No, I'm sorry. I was not following close enough.
Thomas Knapp.
No.
Cat Martin.
Good.
Yes.
And just go back. Paul Grindle, I believe you have no. He said yes.
Okay, there was a confusion. Okay. Josh McHose.
No.
Randy McGlenn.
No.
Bennett Morse.
No.
Dale Perry.
No.
Omar Crow. No. Brian Swinsky. Mrs. Slinsky.
No. Sorry, we're gonna take the mute off.
It's okay. Mr. Starr.
Yes, to add the language. Thank you.
Curry Taylor.
Aye.
Did you call on everyone, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, I was just double checking.
Okay, I have it as a...
Hold on. I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody pass. Meckley is not here.
No, Mr. Van Horn had passed, but then voted.
Right, he voted aye, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I have it as the amendment clearly failing. So now we are back to where we were in the very beginning, which would mean that the currently pending question is whether we're going to vote on, as to whether the substitute motion will become the primary motion or not. A motion to postpone is in order at this time if anyone wishes to make it.
Madam Chair, I would make such a motion.
I'm sorry, who did I have here?
Daryl Perry, I would make such a motion.
So you are doing a motion to postpone until the next meeting?
Postpone indefinitely.
Okay, a motion to postpone indefinitely.
Mr. Chair, I just have a point of information. Does that allow us to have discussion between meetings with us?
Yes. You can have discussion. Yes.
Point of order.
Yes.
Okay, so because we are a committee and all of our meetings are one session, if you postpone indefinitely, it means it cannot come back for the remainder of this session. So I'd be okay with a motion to postpone indefinitely, but I doubt he really wants that.
Mr. Perry, will you please clarify your intention? I don't agree
Considering
with
that we wasted the last half hour of our lives going back to completely where we started, I would be happy if we never discussed this until Austin.
It won't be discussed in Austin. Well, okay, I'm going to tell you proactively that I do not agree with Mr. Starr. But it's not to say
which part?
that we cannot reset a clock at the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll show you the language later on, but that's okay. If you'll.
Oh no, I'd appreciate the language. I'm always open to changing my mind, but right now that is my view. But I'm sure there would be an appeal, and I have no idea how that would go. So right now there is a motion to postpone indefinitely, and we are proceeding to a vote on that motion. Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready, a motion to, a no motion would put us back to voting on whether the substitute's the primary or the primary's the primary. A yes vote would postpone it indefinitely.
And just to be clear, postponing indefinitely means it's done for this year.
I don't agree with that, but that is Mr. Starr's interpretation.
Request for information.
Yes, Mr. Fulner.
If we do choose to postpone this indefinitely, there would be nothing to prevent this committee from proposing another proposal on this same plank. Is that correct? Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, would you like me to read the language from Roberts?
I don't really think that's ripe yet because I haven't made a ruling. We can talk about it in between meetings.
But if people are going to be voting, they should know what the impact of their vote is.
Is there an objection to Mr. Starr reading some RONR for everyone's information?
I object. We're already 8 minutes over time.
Okay, there's an objection as we are over time, so we're going to proceed to voting on the motion to postpone indefinitely whenever Mr. Secretary is ready.
I am. Okay, Matt Choco.
So essentially, it's impossible to know what my vote is doing here under these circumstances. So I'm going to have to vote. I'm going to have to abstain.
Laura Epke.
Yes.
Richard Fass.
Yes.
Jim Fulner.
I vote yes.
Helen Gilson.
Yes.
Paul Grindle.
Yes, please. If you could add like an exclamation point, that'd be great.
Duke Van Horn.
I vote yes.
Thomas Knapp.
Yes.
Cat Martin.
Abstain.
Josh McHose,
Yes.
Randy McGlenn,
I vote yes.
Bennett Morris,
Abstain.
Daryl Perry,
I 150 billion% vote yes.
Omar Curl will vote yes. Ryan Slawinski,
Yes.
Aaron Starr,
By the way, I posted the language from page 126, and so therefore I will be voting yes to postpone this indefinitely.
Curry Taylor,
Abstain.
did I miss anyone's vote?
Okay, it is postponed indefinitely, and we are out of the scheduled time for this meeting, so the meeting will be adjourned officially at 9:10.